Good evening, everybody. Right now, what I thought I'd talk about is what's in your gold pan. A little bit of an episodic thing back onto the main tool that you'll use as a gold prospector, and that is your gold pan. Showing on this front cover here, you'll see a fair amount of black sands, which go with gold. Right here, Josh is going after the gold. He's got a whole bunch of stuff he's gone through down below. You can see in the catch basin, he has a catch pan that he pans into because this particular black sand was pretty rich and it had a fair amount of fine gold in it. We had been processing the output of our sluice for the day, and so it took a fair amount of work to go through this. What I wanted to point out to you was just kind of some tips and tricks around gold prospecting and using a pan. So that's what tonight's about. Let's check back with you guys and see how we're doing and make sure that our audio and everything's going good. I just found out it wasn't going to go well, so I want to make sure it is, because it was selecting the wrong audio again, but I caught it before we started. So right now, I'm refreshing, and there it is. Okay, we're live. We've got 7 people and 2 comments, and we'll see what the comments have to say. And it looks like we have Charles is here, Bob's here, Brad's here. Good to see you guys. And so, all ears in Texas, says Brad. Charles says the rain is coming for the next 5 days. Yeah, we got some ourselves in the last 2 days. That's what I was showing you the picture. That's kind of weird. You know, it was supposed to all go to the north, but it decided to detour. And really weird at the last minute. So we got some last night, which we were supposed to get a bunch. We didn't get as much last night as the hills just about 5 miles north of here got up to an inch an hour. Wow, that's fire area. So they were having problems with evacuations and floods, just like always, you know. So that's fun. So anyway, let me turn down the volume on this guy. We got audio coming through clear, and we will proceed with our discussion of gold pans. So again, I'm going to emphasize that when you go with a gold pan, that you go with the gold pan, and I choose, I often use this one. This is your typical 12-inch unit. I also have another one that I favor, which is 14, so it's 2 inches more in diameter. The reason the 14 is that it gets more volume through. The reason the 12 is it's easy to pack in and pack out, and it has an interesting property that it's much lighter on the arms. So if you have a tendency like I do where your arms get sore from all the other stuff that goes on, you might try using a smaller diameter pan. You go through material slower, but you will go through the material and you won't quite wear your wrists out and your arms out. But that's something you might be aware of. This pan has, again, 3 sets of riffle zones. It has the coarse riffles here. It has, if you can't quite see it, but it has a dull finish in this zone right here. And then it transitions right there, you can see where my finger is pointing, to a shiny finish area. And the dull finish, it comes in real handy for processing just the black sand you're seeing over there on that picture that Josh was handling. So it's something important. This pan is a Keen Engineering, doesn't say that this is a super sluice or super pan, but that's one of theirs. The thing I like about Keen's pans that I have tested, I know you can't quite see this one, but it's been beat and thrashed for years, and they last. I go in an area where these things will spend a good chunk of the summer out in the sun. I've had some other pans. I don't have one here to show you, or I would. I don't think. No. I had it in one of my other videos, and somebody caught the point that it had a big hole through the side of it. And the beauty is that these things seem to withstand the weathering like some others don't, especially the cheaper Chinese ones. So that's important to me. Here's another thing you want to have with your pan is a sieve. I use this, this is a 1/4 inch, number 4. And so when you use it, you can see the number 4 on the corner. I mark them so I know what size they are, because they don't, they oftentimes come with it, but it'll wear off. So I mark them so that as it wears, it doesn't wear that junk off. I put it up in the top corner. The thing about a 1/4 inch is it's kind of a good number for the area I work. Any coarse gold will drop through it. Any nuggets will stick to the top and can be easily picked off with a detector. But that allows me to process a lot of material very quickly. And the problem with using a finer sieve, which you can, you know, I've got some down to 50, 100 mesh kind of thing. The problem with using those is you have to use them with feeds of like 50 mesh or lower, so that they don't jam up or they don't dent and scrape and punch holes in them. So you just want to make sure you use the right ones. I find that processing material like we're looking at here with that kind of a sieve before you start moving them through does two things. One, it moves the material through faster, and two, it makes sure that the material sifts out cleanly and sifts as in pans out cleanly and doesn't lose any small particles, because a bigger chunk of rock or material will bump out a smaller piece of coarse gold or flake, and so you don't want to do that while you're panning. The other thing about a pan that I find very useful is well, heck, I use them for all kinds of stuff besides panning. Carrying rocks, you know, I fill them with rocks all the time, like, you know, this. So don't ask me why, I just do. That is one of the things, though, that will thrash your pans faster than lickety-split, but, you know, I do it all the time. And that brings me to tonight's promotion is sourdoughminer.com Gold Prospectors Collection, which has Panning for the Pay Streak in it, and talks all about all of these strategies of pan use and different things that you can do with them to accomplish your task, your goal. The pan is your #1 tool next to your shovel and pick. Between those three, you can do all the prospecting you need. It might be slower than you want, but you can do it. And so that's why I advocate getting a pan, and maybe a couple of them, different sizes. Part of why you want a couple of them is simply because you might run into some situations where a smaller pan just comes in handier for the volume of or type of material you're using, or a larger pan if you're processing a lot of material quickly and you can handle it in a larger pan, go for it. Some people swear by metal pans. I'm not one of those, although I have used a metal pan a lot. But and the reason I don't is they're just heavier. You know, they're harder to handle, and they are you know, but they do process material pretty quickly, and a lot of people swear by them. It's just one of those things where if you're hooked on it, you're hooked on it. So don't get me wrong, I'm not dissing metal pans. I'm just saying that you know, the plastic pan, because of the contours and stuff. Now, metal pans can also have contours pressed in them. That's kind of where all these things came from. This is oftentimes called the Chinese riffle, because the Chinese used to hammer their pans and put dents and riffles in them to get exactly the same processing characteristics that we're talking about. So there's nothing particularly new there, and it's something important to be able to do. So anyway, the Gold Prospectors Collection has that material in it, and it's kind of good to do. The other thing I do with a pan, this is my wife, she's panning, working around some stuff underneath the rock. And the beauty of a pan is it's kind of, think of it as a miniature bucket. You can collect material and then take it over to the stream to process. Do that all the time. The thing she's doing is crevicing. She's clearing out the bottom of a crevice that has gold nuggets and small, you know, coarse gold chunks in it. And so the objective that she has is to kind of collect everything out of there, sweep it out, get it into the pan, go pan it one pan at a time, process that, put the gold in the vial, put the black sands in another container, because you never know, the black sands later, when they process in the blue bowl or other collection system, can refine into some more fine gold that you might find useful. And so that's a thing you always want to keep track of. So that's kind of what I wanted to touch on tonight, was what's in your gold pan. I'd like to hear from you, if you wouldn't mind commenting below, and tell me your panning experiences and what you use, what you favor in the way of pans. What is your favorite kind, and maybe even brand? Remark below what you use. I'd like to hear from you. So right now, Brad Stevens is all ears. Let's see. Victor Fraser says, sounds good. Okay. And Paul's on. Hey, you made it. Awesome. Been a tornado city down that way. So let's see. Chris says, I prefer the larger 17-inch. So he's in for the giant pans from Proline, for its wide bottom and many riffles on the side. And that's an interesting point. There are differing bottoms. There are wide bottoms, there are narrow bottoms, there are even pointy bottoms. Okay, the thing that some of them have are little ridges. You can see them on this one. Let me hold it so it catches the light, just so. You see these ridges right in here. This is about a 1/4 inch high. That acts as a first stage riffle and helps catch black sands when you're working them. You can kind of see it in the picture here. where my son is working some black sands, you can see it's kind of caught all around the edge of the bottom of the pan, and right over in this region right here. And that's important when it comes to being able to trap out and kind of sift through black sands quickly. Different people like different widths, different depths, etc. I'm fond of this. Other people are fond of the other. So thanks for sharing. I appreciate that, Chris. Who else has a favorite pan that they like and that they'd like to share? Copper pans. That's one time popular. Now, part of why, well, anyway, that's an interesting kind of pan. To me, it's a little heavy. You know, steel's lighter in terms of specific gravity, and they are more flexible, so you can pound more ripples and riffles into copper pans than steel. But it's still one of those things. Tim is there watching in Centralia, Washington. Good to see you, Tim. Jim, rather. Jim Tassendorf. So, let's see. Garrett pan. To each his own. There we go. Diane Lewis. And Garrett, it makes a very popular pan. I've got one floating around here. I've also got one that I picked up from the Gold Prospectors Club, GPA, somewhere. Comes as part of their kit, the Gold Catcher, and again has that same sort of ripple structure. It doesn't have as distinct an edge, you know, where you have the fine and coarse, but it is kind of a softer finish. It's not as prominent. This one's never been used, so it looks clean, and I would recommend in any pan that you scrub this thing out really well with a Brillo pad or a copper swab and some soap. And get all of they call it molding oil, but you want to get all of the finish oil off of there and put a little bit of a rough coating on it. I recommend the whole thing should not be very shiny at all. See how shiny this is on the backside? That's disaster when it comes to fine gold, because it has an oil on it, for a silicone oil, that will catch on your gold and lift it right out the top and over the edge, and you don't want to do that. So I've talked about that in the past. I just thought I'd bring it up again tonight, since we're on the theme of gold pans. What is the biggest nugget you've ever caught in your gold pan? Tell me down below. Big nuggets, or what is the most interesting thing you've found in your pan? I've found frogs. That was interesting. Pocket pan gold claw, says Charles. Okay, so he's into the pocket pan and the gold claw. All right. It's a great idea. Yeah, it gives everybody an idea. And one of the things that, here's what I always say to people. Whatever floats your boat, you know, try a few different styles. I didn't start with this. I started actually with one of these El Cheapo. Wasn't super El Cheapo, but kind of. Made in Taiwan, pan, pick, and shovel mining company, Coloma. Okay, this is a finishing pan. Use this with black sands. Notice it doesn't have much in the way of riffles, and the edges are all coarse, like we talked about. And notice how dirty it is, because it's been used a lot to process a lot of black sands. So, but I started using one of those simply because it was easy. And by the way, it's kind of lightweight, easy to pack into a lunch sack, and away you go. And then I went to a more respectable pan. Now, the only reason I did that is because I wanted to process more material, and because the material varied in size. That kind of riffle, where you have variable riffles, is more useful than the one lower gauge riffle that really works best on fine stuff. And you know, this works on coarse gold and fine gold. It doesn't work so good on big rocks and nuggets. It's not so good to process that because it doesn't hook them and they tend to fly out. But you can even make nuggets stick in that. It just requires a little more finesse. So let's see, what else we got here, guys? What's the strangest thing or the biggest nugget you have caught in your pan? Comment below. Let me know. 1/4 inch screen for my area, says Chris. Right. And that 1/4 inch, what he means by 1/4 inch screen is this classifier sieve, 1/4 inch size. They come in all different diameters and all different structures. I was looking at one today. A guy had, it was kind of an interesting thing. It was a stackable set. Stackable sets, I have a stackable set, a giant set that goes with that one. So I'm not saying don't get stackable sets, because I fell for that. But you don't need to. stack that many. He had a stackable set that was about 10 strong, 10 different sizes, and they were all about 8-inch in diameter. Now, why would you want to do that? Well, it'd come handy in packing, but I wouldn't stack 10 different diameters in packing. It just makes no sense. Now, if you're refining and processing, lots of the same stuff, like black sands or certain materials that might have certain size gold, then that makes a difference. But for the purposes of just a general size, 1/4 inch is great. Now, some areas, because if you're processing lots of sands, then I'd go down to a 1/16 or so. Now, I know a lot of people have to go to 100 mesh and things like that when they're processing with a table and that kind of stuff. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about working it with a pan. So when you're processing with a pan, it comes handy to have a classifier. Really speeds up your use of a pan. I recommend it highly. Don't leave home without it. So let's see what else we got here. Comments coming in. Nobody's commenting about, rain in Nebraska again, says Richard. And let's see. All ears in Texas. So what is the best gold pan you can buy? Well, I know this is going to come pretty biased. I'm really biased with there's a super pan that Keen makes. It's a 14-inch. That's the one I use the most. This is the next most, but I just don't have the 14-incher here, or I'd show it to you, but that's different. That's a good question for the other guys. What do you think's the best you can buy? The key word there is best, because that immediately evokes bias. And we all know that we here at Hunting for Gold are biased, as in we have an opinion. I'd like to hear your opinion. What kind of pan do you like the best? And I don't want to make a big deal about it. I just want to know what you like the best. That's a good question. But I've told you my best. What is yours? And by the way, I've tried, this isn't the only kind of pan I've tried. I've got a Garrett and I've got several others, so I've used them. I just happen to prefer the Keen ones for some crazy reason, probably because I got a bunch of them and I can grab them. That's the best pan you can have is the one near you. Have one with you. That makes it best. Sure, you want to have more of, but by the way, I would recommend having more than one pan. They do break, especially when you're tossing them across the street. Now, that's not a thing to do, but it has been done. So they do break. Usually after they've been weathered in the sun, because it bakes out all that good stuff that makes them flexible. Amy's here. Hi. But what is the best gold pan you can buy? Now, you can buy gold pans for $5, $4. I've seen them as low as $3. Generally, the $3 ones are these finishing style, $3 or $4 Taiwanese. But again, and they're light. That's the other reason I like those. They're very light, much lighter than these are, but they're not as durable and so forth. These will run you, 12 or so bucks or more. And you can get pans all the way up to 25 or so bucks. You could probably, if you got copper or steel, it's going to cost you a little bit. The other reason I don't like copper or steel is it costs you a little bit for, and steel, you have to blue them properly. You treat them with heat and blue them. I learned that from my mom. She blued the first pan I've ever seen right in front of me. It was interesting to watch. Heat it up till it's cherry red and then let it cool off in the air, and it puts the surface with a coating of oxide that keeps it from corroding. Otherwise, the thing will rust right through. Even then, the old timers still let them rust a little bit because that gives that rough coating we're talking about that, shows up in the plastic. So, that's the idea, is you really do want a rough coating, and rust isn't that bad. You just don't want the thing to rust out on you, because that's not so good. The gold goes out the bottom, bad idea. So that's tonight's story. I just wanted to touch bases with you and talk a little bit about what's in your gold pan and get to know you a little better on gold panning and prospecting. Again, Gold Prospectors Collection. Check out the sale. It's running through the holiday, and you can still get a hold of it. If you look, there'll be a link somewhere above or below on this post. And there's also some emails and posts that have gone out about this. Just check over the last week. You'll find them. It's a good deal, so check it out and let me know what you think. Chris says, I started with a 17-inch plastic Keen for years. Because of what I started with, I find all other sizes too small for me. See, there you go. Now, are you a big guy? That's the question, okay? Because it really does vary based on your hand, wrist, and arm strength. Most of my friends, Chris says, use a 15-inch Garrett Super. So there you go, 15, 14, but a 17 is a honking pan. Not 22, that'd be interesting. I call that a trash can lid. Amy says, any creek nearby, I use my magnet and I'm picking up black stuff. What is it? The black stuff that you pick up with your magnet is magnetite. And it is a form of black sand, very similar to what you see in this picture, right there. And that is magnetite. And if you took a magnet, you'd sweep it around in there and pull up all the black sands there is. Now the problem is, if you don't do it right, you'll pull up all the fine gold that's with it, because it'll trap in between the chunks of black sand. So you have to handle it very carefully and let the gold settle through as you're stirring with the magnet. And there's a whole thing you can do with that. It makes it very, very interesting video in its own right. But that's a good point. How do you separate black sands from gold? There's several ways. One is using a pan, and the other one is using magnets, because a lot of the black sands are magnetics. Not all are. So if you have a non-magnetic black sand, how do you separate it? Density, gravity, tapping, pan. Learn to do, there's a thing called the blueberry bounce. Look it up. There's several other techniques using a gold pan. They all require very careful finessing of the pan and use of essentially acceleration, because remember, gold has density. Density affects the way it behaves with gravity. It also affects the way it accelerates when you accelerate. And tapping causes a thing, it's the third derivative of speed, or position rather, which is, the first derivative is velocity, second derivative is acceleration, okay? And the third derivative is a change in acceleration, and it's called the jerk. Go figure. But you're causing jerk, and that tapping causes a change in the acceleration in the gold that's in the pan. Now here's the deal. It actually causes the change. Here's the why. Ready for this for tonight? Big tip. As you tap the pan, the gold that's sitting in your pan, you know, your gold here is sitting in the bottom of your pan, and when you tap it, this isn't going to work too well, but you'll get the idea anyway, because it's going to roll around when I do this. I just know it. So let's see if we can, let's try a rock. And I'm going to hold this in such a way that you can see it at the bottom here. As I tap it, notice the rock appears to move toward my tapping hand. Why is that? It should move away, shouldn't it? It should move in the direction I'm tapping. No, the rock has inertia that's given by its density. The pan out-accelerates the rock. The pan out-accelerates the gold. So the gold shifts toward your hand. That's what the blueberry bounce does. So what happens is you sit there and tap it like this, and like the black sands in there, the gold will move toward your fingers where you're tapping and away from the other side, and the black sands and stuff will tend to be shifted in the other direction because it's going to follow where the pan takes it. This is all part of the finessing and skill you learn. There's also swirling, which has the similar property. Each one of these take advantage of various things with friction and the density and the inertia of the gold. When you use those, the pan comes in real handy, knowing all these different ways of moving it to separate out gold from black sands or dirt. And so that's kind of tonight's story. How many times do you shake your pan between dips in the water? Well, it depends on what you're dealing with. If you're dealing with fine gold, you want to be very careful to shake gently. If you're dealing with coarse gold, you want to rock that thing like crazy and get it to go. It'll go to the bottom very fast. And then you want to shave it off quickly. And dips in the water, I basically, I don't ever really take it out of the water until I'm done with the first levels of shaving, because basically when I shave, I do the dip and shave thing. I dip it once and I shave it until I get all the material off the top. That's all covered in panning for the pastry. There's a demonstration in there of panning and shaving and how that all goes together. So that's kind of the thing. Different direction, Charles says. Yes, a different direction from the tap. So it's heading in the opposite direction, the gold is. It's heading toward your hand, because what happens is you tapped. Remember the old thing? So I've got the old trick where I have something on the table and I go and pull this out from under it. Why does the heavy object like a glass on the table stay put? And the answer is inertia. This thing has a certain amount of M that it takes a lot of A and friction to impart more to get it to move along with it. If you move very slowly, it'll follow along with it. If you move quickly, there's so much inertia here that it doesn't have a chance to move before you pull this out. Same thing holds true in your gold pan. So you're shifting the gold pan relative to the gold. That's the trick there. That's the why for tonight. So I thought I'd touch bases on that. If you watch, there's a bunch of guys that really know how to do those blueberry bumps, and there's all kinds of other little vibrating tricks they do, tick, 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 you know, that get the gold to separate out. And knowing those really is useful, especially for those of you who are working with glacial gold. Get familiar with that kind of technique, the tapping, bumping, and all that stuff, because that's how you separate out fine gold fast. Without that, you're going to need a vibrating table or something really expensive. and you don't need it. If you're just sampling small amounts of fine gold, you can do it with a gold pan. You can do it. Part of the reason why this has a broad base, you know, notice it's much bigger than the base on this one, is because it works really well for doing just that kind of thing. And it's also fairly light, so it's got almost no mass. You can really accelerate this pan relative to a piece or two of fine gold in there, of coarse gold. It'll separate them out real fast. That's a good point. Great tips. So I think that's it for tonight. I just wanted to touch with that. How many times? Let's see. We talked about just about everything everybody's gotten. I still don't have any answers from you guys about what was the funnest thing or the strangest thing you found in your pan. You got to put that in here, even if you're ashamed or afraid of putting it in there during the show. Don't be ashamed. You shouldn't be ashamed of what you found in your gold pan. You should be proud of it. This is Prospector Jess. He wants to make sure you're happy with gold prospecting and that you find more gold, because that's what we're about here at Hunting for Gold. Remember that. The whole business is what's in your gold pan and how can Prospector Jess help you find more of it. So that's what we're doing tonight, and that's the topic for the season, and we're going to be leaving it. I'll catch you tomorrow. I did send out a email earlier. I don't know, some of you may have gotten it. Some of you probably aren't on the list, so you should check out where to subscribe on the Sourdough Miner or the Hunting for Gold page. You can subscribe to our email, get updates and things like that. But when I sent that out, oops, I put a link to last night's video and I didn't put the link in correctly, so it goes boom, back to your browser. At least it goes there instead of, could go worse. Anyway, that's it for tonight. Check it out and check out that Gold Prospectors collection. See you then. Good prospecting.